It's Lightning Talks time. Hooray! I haven't done one of these in 3 years in person and 6 years here in New Zealand, so it's very exciting to be back here on stage presenting your Kiwi PyCon Lightning Talks again. So we have, thank you very much. Okay, we have 12 presenters, all of whom are going to be presenting talks of 5 minutes or less on subjects that I hope you'll find interesting and varied and enlightening. Okay, my friend Tom Eastman is in the front row with our timing device, and basically it's your job as the audience to make sure that we keep to time. As we approach the last 5 seconds of the talk, if you can start making like a bit of ruffling noise by banging your index fingers together, and then as we hit the end of the 5 minutes, give a massive round of applause until the person shuts up and walks off stage. Can we do a bit of a practice? Okay. And now I'm going to get off stage, and up first we have Tim.
My name's Tim. I'm going to talk to you about a library I wrote. We were told we weren't allowed to do advertising, but that's pretty much what it is. First of all, let's talk about history of interfaces. Lots of people have heard about Zope interface, very popular, and then I'm going to talk about what I wrote, which is called Pure Interface. So Zope interface is very, very old. It predates at symbols for decorators, not even at symbols for matrix multiplication. And you could declare an interface simply by subclassing the interface class. It had a manky syntax for declaring attributes, and your methods didn't have the self argument, which confused your IDE. And then to implement an interface, you declare that your class implements that interface, and there's no way that your IDE can help you. So, you need to override these base class methods. Nope, you've got to copy and paste all your methods from there and put them in there, and it's a bit of a pain to use. So by the time we had abstract base classes, oh yes, and it's not even a class. Never mind. I thought, hey, Python's given us abstract base classes, let's write an ABC-based interface library. And so I did. And so I started off writing interfaces that looked like this. I used class attributes, and you had to set the value to none because we didn't have type annotations. But then protocols came along, and so now you declare a class by writing essentially a protocol, if you know what that means. But you declare with type hints what your class attributes are, and with empty method bodies what your methods are, and that's your interface. And if you want to implement your interface, you subclass it. A little quirk of the library is that you have to include object in your base classes. That's why you're telling Pure Interface that you want a concrete implementation rather than just another sub-interface. And then you implement it. And I've got 250 left. Pure Interface does lots of code checks. So if this is my interface, you can't instantiate your interface like an ABC class. They're not supposed to be instantiable. If you subclass it and say, I'm implementing this interface, but don't, it's going to complain when you import your module with that class. However, sometimes you're writing a base class that doesn't implement all of the interface, and so you can override that behavior and say, hey, this is just a partial implementation. If your implementation overrides a method with an incompatible signature, it will complain about that too. Yeah, I forgot to mention, you see my interface class? There's code in my interface, which is just supposed to be an interface. It will complain about that too. It actually goes through and checks the bytecode on your methods, which is fun to maintain when they keep changing it every release. So you think Q is a positional argument. It's not. It's positional or keyword. So if someone calls your interface with Q equals, like your override method here, it doesn't actually work, so it'll fail. Foundational to any interface library, and a big part of Zope interface, is being able to adapt one type to another, and of course that's in Pure Interface. So if I have a bar class which has a Y property and I need something that has an X property, I can adapt it by simply saying hey, I've got this adapter class that takes a bar and will implement the foo interface. If your function takes a foo interface, then it's a really good idea to adapt your parameter, because that way you can not take actual instances of foos, you can take bars as well, because actually we know how to make a bar act like a foo, and it generally makes your code work on a much wider range of objects. If you like duck typing, you can say allow implicit equals true, which is, we'll do duck typing and say, well, if you've got an X, and then if you've got a bar method, I'll call you an implementation of foo. Optional adapt. This is handy if sometimes you allowed none. Interface only equals true. If your implementation is going to have more methods than your interface, and you declare you take the interface, but you use methods from your implementation, you're going to find out far too late unless you pass interface only equals true. 10 seconds. And of course, we all love data classes. 8% people use them, so you can use data class decorators. Done. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Okay, up on deck we have Daisy, but first, Ben Riddell, who's going to talk about his Wake-on-LAN proxy server.
So you can just call me Ben. And if you don't know what a Wake-on-LAN proxy server is, then hopefully you'll have an idea after this talk. So this is more of just a hobby project of mine to learn how to use a microcontroller, this ESP32, and I decided to use MicroPython to learn to work with it. So being an engineer, I had a use case. I run a media service. I can share videos, mainly of my whitewater kayaking, which is another hobby of mine. The issue is that these videos are high bit rates. This here is a 4K one with almost 50 megabits per second. So I also run it off my gaming rig because it needs the computational power to actually process it and transcode those videos down to, so that my family and friends can watch it on their phones and other laptops. This presents a couple of issues. If I want it to be always available, the power consumption alone is in the hundreds of dollars, let alone the wear and tear on expensive components. So the solution to that is to just power it on as I need it or as my family and friends want to. But I don't want to have to go and press the button myself, so I automated it with this proxy server. So I need to utilize the Wake-on-LAN packet protocol. There's quite a few issues around these things. They're insecure because it's only the network card that's got a little bit of power. There's no processing to do anything with encryption and stuff. It's basically broadcasting the MAC address as well, which, if I'm in a coffee shop and I want to wake up my computer, I don't really want that, my MAC address open to the public routing through the internet. It also presents the use case that if I want to change the code on this Wake-on-LAN packet, I'd have to update it for all my family and friends, which would be a bit of an issue. So I decided to use this microcontroller as a proxy. So that's where I can restrict and block access, and I can also utilize more of the 12 bytes that you get with this Wake-on-LAN packet. I can also start utilizing things like logging who's waking it with, at what time and IP address that they're using. And rather than costing hundreds of dollars to run throughout the year, it's costing me, $10 instead. So effectively, you got the internet. I'm on my phone. I can just press a button on my on the app to wake it, or family or friends can, and it will send it through the internet, through the router, get port forwarded to the microcontroller, which then forwards the actual packet, which never leaves the network, onto the gaming rig and actually boots it up. And then that can be communicated with, HTTPS and all the other secure channels to operate to access those videos. So MicroPython, because it is mainly a networking sort of problem rather than hardware using sensors and LEDs and everything to power on and off, it just made it a bit easier to use Python. It was something I'm familiar with. And also just development was so much easier, being able to use what they call the REPL, having the interpreter run on the controller as well. So I was also able to do it, in sub 100 lines of code as well, ignoring the list of tokens that I've put in and assigned to everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, up on deck on this side we have Grant, so if you can come and get ready, that would be good. Before we begin Daisy's talk, she's going to be covering a few topics that some people may find distressing, which include transphobia, institutional violence, vigilante violence, forced detransition, suicide, Nazism, and the Holocaust. If any of these topics would be distressing to you, you can take a moment to walk out of the room and listen for some applause at the end when you want to come back in. Okay, Daisy.
Have I got audio? Yep, lovely. Okay. So, as Chris mentioned, I have just a few content warnings. And also, as he mentioned, if you find this talk distressing, it is okay to step outside. I didn't want to give this talk. I originally planned to present a reprise of a really lighthearted talk written by a friend a few years ago about supermarkets. Some of you may know the one. It's very good. I'll post a link on Twitter after. But then I saw this tweet. This was posted privately by someone in the Python community, somebody whose code you might have used. And it's in reference to this. This is a bill that's being drafted in the US Congress, which would forcibly detransition all trans teenagers, ban healthcare providers from covering gender-affirming care for all trans adults, ban higher education from teaching gender-affirming care to doctors, and ban providers of gender-affirming care from entering the country. This will, in effect, forcibly detransition nearly every trans American. It won't pass, but something like it is probably an election or two away. This is already happening in Florida. They've banned age-appropriate healthcare for kids and teenagers and removed insurance coverage for some trans adults. Texas Family Protective Services are going after parents of transgender youth. Healthcare providers are being targeted by vigilante violence, as are trans people ourselves. And the very night after Arkansas's ban became law, 4 trans teenagers took their own lives. That night, more followed. Families are moving across the US so that they can continue to receive healthcare so that their teens aren't driven to suicide by their government. Trans teens without supportive parents are in an even worse situation. In the UK, the sitting Equalities Minister has been openly hostile to trans people and our rights. Meanwhile, in the past few years, opinion polls on trans acceptance in the UK show that it's sliding backwards, and violence against us is on the rise. And that's just reported violence. Most of us don't trust cops. So, why are we trans? Before I transitioned, I felt like I was living passively. Like I was watching life happen around me. I wouldn't have said it that way at the time. I didn't know anything different was possible. But since I transitioned, I'm an active participant in life. Before, life was black and white, and now I'm living in color. Life is so much fuller, more happier, more real. Most people in this room will have experienced the feeling of looking in the mirror and seeing yourself, and most of you probably don't know just quite how it feels to have that experience for the very first time at 27, after a lifetime of not realizing it was possible. Transition was the best decision I ever made, and I say that even in the face of everything I've just talked about. Going back would be 100 times worse. Forced detransition is a fate worse than death. What do we do? What do I do if it happens here? Do we detransition, hide, live in misery? Do we go underground? Do we give up? I cannot overstate how scared we are. I cannot overstate how often we wake up, look at the news, and have thoughts like that quote that I opened with. This is terrifying. This keeps me awake at night. This is life and death. In Aotearoa and Australia, things aren't perfect, but they're nowhere near as bad. Yet. These sorts of things are lapping on our shores, but they've largely failed to gain traction so far. We need it to stay that way. This is all, and here it comes, reminiscent of 1930s Germany. The Weimar Republic had this clinic which issued permits for trans people to dress as themselves and perform the very first gender-affirming vaginoplasty. It was very progressive for its time, but we don't know much about the details of this clinic because of these assholes. The Nazis' main target was the Jewish community, but queer and trans people were targeted too. This famous photo of the Berlin book burnings, all of the Institute's research is in that photo. And yes, I know about Godwin's law, I'm not being glib, and I'm not the only person making this comparison. Back then, there was a rapid slide backwards from this incredibly progressive society, and we need to stop history repeating itself. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Basically, everything's fine in the end, but recent events have me doubting this. But millions died, but over generations we recovered from Nazi Germany, so maybe this is true. But why? What's the forcing function that causes this bend towards justice? There is no law of the universe making it so that everything was all right in the end. The forcing function is you. The arc of the universe only bends because people are pushing it that way. Have conversations, call out transphobia. Facts and figures don't work. Show people we're people. Talk about your trans friends and family members. Talk about me. Talk about how scared we are and how we're just trying to survive. I can't have these conversations because they're so scary. I find it really hard to face someone who wishes upon me a fate worse than death, and people use that to their advantage. They can be cool and detached, but it's life and death for us. Of course it's emotional. And our society equates politeness with virtue, so it's easy to cast us as the unreasonable bad guys, the onlookers that don't know what's going on. We need you to know what's going on. You might not want to have a political conversation, but I don't want my existence to be political. I am tired of being a debate topic. I just want to be left alone. We need your help. We need you to know just how scared we are right now. I don't have all the answers, but I know that we can't do this alone. I'm Daisy. You can get in touch with me on socials or chat to me after. But if I don't have the energy to talk about this topic, please respect that and please don't debate me about this. Thank you for your attention and bearing with me through a very heavy topic.
Thanks for that, Daisy. Okay. We're just going to give a few moments to breathe. Tom's going to talk a bit about some sponsor-related stuff. And Tim Penny, you are up on deck on this side.
Hey everyone, I'm going to take a moment to talk about what we are doing after the lightning talks for the lightning talk speakers. Once I have my... Daisy, I'm just going to come over here and lean my laptop over that. So due to the generosity of Pact Publishing, who produce a lot of really great programming resources, they gave us, as I understand it, the way it works, Danny, is we've been given vouchers for 20 Pact books. And so we have a list of books here, and every Lightning Talk speaker can choose which one they want. And I'm going to go through this list to just show you guys what you missed by not speaking. A lot of really cool artificial intelligence stuff in here. So artificial intelligence with the Python Cookbook, interpretable machine learning with Python, machine learning engineering with Python, machine learning for streaming data with Python. That's the AI stuff. The other books that are available. So the Lightning Talk speakers also have a list of this. You don't need to memorize which one you want right now. Hyperparameter tuning with Python, interactive data visualization with Python 2nd edition. Let's see, practical Python programming for Internet of Things, Python data analysis 3rd edition, scientific computing with Python, time series analysis with Python Cookbook, which is the one that I think I'd be most interested in if I was giving a lightning talk. Does this count, Chris? Do I get a freebie? I'm under time. Okay.
It's not my job.
So again, thank you very much for Pact Publishing.
You're the one with the vouchers, Tom.
Oh, I'm already
You can make your own decision as to whether you want the voucher.
This is what happens when you go over time.
Right. Grant is going to be... What the hell is that? Okay. Grant is going to be talking about the state of digital technology education here in New Zealand. Grant.
Okay, first of all, this is an existing submission which has been insanely shrunk to fit within the Lightning Talk format. So, existing initiatives. There's 2 large documents, government documents, which have come out relatively recently, one late last year and one early this year. And there are some key points from those. We need a far stronger domestic talent pipeline for IT. There needs to be more weight on work-integrated learning, that learn as you earn, and apprenticeships and all the rest of it. And better internship opportunities. So here's some responses. Well, actually, it's a response. I just had to dump everything else, so there's just one response. And it's about traditional academic degrees. I've benefited from academic degrees and so on, but I think there needs to be more emphasis in our industry on short courses and on-job education and training. So what we know, graduates usually, almost all, lack usable skills in the workforce. There's an opportunity cost. It's not that 3 years of doing a traditional degree is worthless or doesn't add much. It's just that if you spend 3 years intensively studying something, what do you get for it? And the issue is, could we be getting more value for that? And learning while doing, we all know that the only way to really understand programming and development is to do it, and there's no substitute for that hands-on component. And finally, traditional degrees can be a golden hammer. If all you offer are 3-year traditional degrees, then that's seen as the answer to every educational need. We need to mix it up a bit. So looking at the relationship between academic degrees and on-the-job training, there's, academic, we have papers, lectures, exercises, tutorials. In the on-job learning, we have online documentation, Stack Overflow, colleagues, and it's the space where academic and on-the-job interact that I'm interested in. So there are two very different approaches. One is academic plus on-job experience, and the other one sort of flips it around. And it's the second of these, where there's on-the-job plus academic, that I think is underused and possibly could be very effective for helping us with our domestic IT pipeline. So academic plus on-job is the norm for engineering, medicine, and so on. There's often weak integration of on-job learning with academic content in the IT space. That's different for engineering and medicine, but in the IT space, it's often weak integration. And often the learning happens, or the on-the-job part happens after most of the learning, so there's little to sort of motivate it. And there are varying levels of input, which means that sometimes there's not a lot, it's just a placement or something. But that varies. Some are very good, some are not so good. On-the-job training plus academic is about real challenging problems, where the employee is highly motivated by the business. Basically, they have deadlines or things they want to achieve to work on the problem until success. So the learning really sticks. The training has clear and immediate business value, and what that means is it's less likely to be squeezed out. Okay, so people need the ability to be able to select matching micro-credentials and short courses, but at the same time to move beyond training into education. So that part should be more academic. It should be principles and concepts, not instructions, not a how-to, but more the broader thinking that a degree often provides. So there are new options, people mixing it up, making it work. Learning needs to be driven by a genuine need. So it shouldn't be just about recruitment filtering. I have this degree, I learned a bit, not as much as I could have, but I'll at least get through the recruitment filters. Oops, I'll just go back one. Staff retention and loyalty. Businesses that support learning will attract talent, keep it longer. Government resources should perhaps follow this approach. And liaison between industry and education could be a lot stronger. And in terms of internship pathways, maybe we should remove the degree filter and look at actual work. So if people have done other things in technology, maybe they should get internships as well. That's it.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you. Okay, so Kelsey is up on deck. But first we have Tim, who's going to talk about one of my favorite honking good ideas, type hints.
Hey everybody. I want to thank Chris actually for the keynote yesterday to get me on to PEP 544, which I was reading, and I came across a covariant aspect on the type class, which got me thinking about this talk. So I had a problem. It's related to my work code. I use VS Code. I like having type hints turned on, and I like VS Code telling me when I'm doing things wrong. So I racked up the type settings, and I get heaps of errors because a lot of our code doesn't have type hints. So I was trying to go on a mission to lower them. So in this particular example, I'm just going to go through. We're using SQL Alchemy. Should be familiar to a lot of you. We have modules per entity type. And a lot of our methods, we return snapshots of those objects, not the live objects themselves. We didn't want to have accidental modifications or stale attributes. So effectively, we have a wrapper class which takes a snapshot of the resulting query. So we have this simple type class type. So we've got a wrapper base and a wrapper file, and then an account has a wrapper type, and a policy has a wrapper type, and our other attributes have equivalent types. Now this wrapper base class had a few decorators to simplify some of the repeated stuff that you end up doing. So here's an example. Hopefully it's legible. So this thing will basically wrap around a function that takes some arguments. Basically, it runs some code. It calls fetch one on the result and may construct an object of the class type. If it returned one, or it'll return nothing. So that takes a single attribute and returns a row. And then we've got another one, which is wrap rows, which will return a list of said types, similarly from those SQL queries. And used like this. So this is an account wrapper. So we have a wrapper.wrapRow decorator around our function. So this gets you a single account, or it may return an account or none. And when we say get all of them, you'll return a list of account wrappers. Unfortunately, when it was used, the type inference in the code couldn't work out what the return type was. It says, you're a result. I think that came from SQL Alchemy. And it didn't understand any of the attributes. And I didn't like that. So I wanted to fix it. So if we look at the types, I have a class method on the base class. The return type is based on the derived class, and it was a decorator itself. So this is written big because this is the thing I want you to take away from this lightning talk, and it's the bound keyword on the type var. So type var comes from the typing module. What this says is the _w type is a wrapper base or anything derived from it. Now that's useful, and it's similar to covariant, but this is more tightly bound. So it's this class or one of their subclasses. And so then we're able to annotate these two methods. So firstly, we need to say that the class is a type derived from this type. So the _w was a wrapper base or something derived from it. So the class is a type of that. And then what it returns is a callable, because it's a decorator, that takes any number of arguments and returns an optional wrapper. And that wrapper type is the type of the class. And similarly for wrap rows, it returns a list of wrappers. So the interesting thing there is fundamentally the callable bit is just because it's a decorator. Those ... dots are actual ... dots, not me eliding code, which is the next line. But this is one of the things, is do just enough type hinting to solve your problem, because I didn't try and assign a type for F or assign a type for the first part of the callable, because it's just, it could be anything. But this was enough to help resolve all the issues, and I'll take you back to that because that's the useful thing. And that's my talk.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Hey, is Ari here? Great, so you are up on deck on this side. I'll just give you a moment to get up on stage before you get in Kelsey's way. But our next presenter is Kelsey, who is going to be talking about inclusivity.
Hi everyone. I haven't actually prepared any slides, so you'll just get to look at this wonderful artwork up here while I'm talking. This has been inspired by part of Chris's keynote yesterday when he was talking about the inclusivity efforts that PyCon and the wider Python community have been embarking on. And I wanted to give a little bit of my personal experience as a first-time attendee and why it really mattered to me when I saw all of that in the registration form. Inclusivity is really, really important in programming in general everywhere. When we have a more diverse group of people, we have more insight, we have better thoughts, we can approach problems from so many different ways, and we get better outcomes. This is one of those places where, if I'm going to quote something you might recognize, explicit is better than implicit. Diversity really helps everybody thrive, but we have to call it out. We have to say what is going on and make sure people know. So, as Jenny mentioned earlier, we really need all of those diverse people feeling confident enough to contribute, to stand up and actually speak what is on their mind. People's attitudes towards this really matter. And one quote that I think encompasses this really well is, when you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression. We're not saying that everybody deserves more than you because you deserve less. We're looking for equality of outcome, not equality of inputs. The paradox of tolerance in our society is that if we try to have a perfectly tolerant society, we will eventually lose out to intolerance, because you just tolerate that intolerance and it will just come and take over. It will push all of those people out, and we need them here, and we need to hear what they have to say. When I opened the registration form and I saw that there was pronoun fields, there was all of this respectful stuff about looking for dietary accommodations, other accommodations that people need, I was genuinely touched. I was telling people that I know how awesome this conference that I'm going to go to seems to be, because they care. They seem to care what I have to say, they care that I can stand up here and be myself, and that I feel confident to share all of this with you. And that really makes a big difference. The fact that there is a creche here, that there is actually attempts made for people of lower socioeconomic backgrounds to be able to attend. In my recently previous life as a solo mum and a poor student, still a solo mum, but I'm leaving the poor student part behind, I didn't make it to barely any professional events because I had to take care of my kids. I didn't have money for babysitting. I couldn't get to these events that were happening at the time where I had to pick them up and I had to get them home and I had to get them to bed. And I really wish that I had known there were things available at PyCon that could help. Maybe I could have actually made it here in the future, in the past, rather than here now for the first time. And so I just wanted to say thank you for all of the effort. It has been noticed. It has been really appreciated. I think Daisy's talk earlier really highlights some of why this is really, really important and why it's needed. Some parts of the world are going backwards, and if we don't call it out, if we don't stand up and say, I support people, I am here and I am willing to listen to you, then they won't know, and they will hide, and they will fear for their lives. So I think that is about all I really had to say. So thank you everybody for being here, for making this feel like a welcome and inclusive space. And yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Kelsey. I don't know if you got from my keynote yesterday, but I really love the Python community deeply, and seeing talks like that, showing that people notice the effort that we collectively put in as a community is really touching, so thank you for that. It means a lot. So Jimmy is up on this side, but first we have Ari, who's going to be talking about spatial data.
Cool. Hello, everybody. My name's Ari. I'm going to be talking to you about GeoPandas and just spatial data in Python. So to start with, I'm an engineer by education, a data scientist at Spark by employment, and definitely a cautionary tale to others. If you've never sort of worked with geospatial data before, it can be quite difficult to sort of work with. There's more information than just a lat long that you have to deal with. If you've ever tried to take an orange peel and flatten it out straight, you'll know the issue that map makers had when they were sort of making maps to fit in a nice rectangle. So yeah, with geospatial data, we've got lots of different types of it. It's often used to sort of represent points or lines or polygons on surfaces. And this is a nice sort of thing ripped off Wikipedia about sort of all these different things that you might not necessarily consider around how you have to define those different shapes. So if you're working with like countries, for example, with islands, you're having to deal with potentially shapes that are sort of these multi-polygon shapes that define other information. So how does that sort of come about? This is kind of a classic pandas table. It's just the sort of first 5 rows that has some information about different countries, their GDP and their population estimate. What GeoPandas does is it's kind of this nice spatial library that gives you the ability to kind of tack on these like geometry columns onto it so that you've got all that metadata alongside it. This is a nice little animation that's stolen from the R package that does similar things. And you can kind of see they're just kind of taping these geometries, these shapes onto the table. And what that kind of means is you've got all of these nice abilities to do pandas operations, but on geospatial data as well. So here I'm just kind of pulling in some, just one of the inbuilt shape data files that exists in the GeoPandas library, and you can see that we get this sort of geometry column that sits off on the right there, and you can see those different shape attributes. And what that kind of lets you do is you can do a bunch of little things. I'm just going to show you just that, with pandas you can do these kind of basic operations around new columns and the like. Sorting, it all kind of comes along, but it takes those geometries along with them. And so what I've done is created a GDP per capita column off on the right there. From this particular data, you can see Antarctica is coming up as the highest GDP per capita. For the next slide as well, I decided to filter that, and again, it's just the sort of same simple filter equations. What's quite nice about that is there's kind of just some inbuilt things. There's this like explore method that lets you basically bring up an interactive map straight away with all of your nice polygons, and you can color code it by these different bits and pieces. You can get all that information just for sort of quick debugging. When I do a lot of geospatial work, that's the sort of quick view that I like, and it's very straightforward and basic to pull things up. There's a lot more to the package that, if you're interested, they've just got quite a nice, simple documentation around those different bits and pieces. Basically, all of the stuff over on this side around doing manipulations, working out if points exist in polygons, and merging polygons, doing sort of different aggregations and things like that with the spatial side of things is all sort of available as well. And there's sort of a large ecosystem of packages. This page in particular just sort of scrolls on forever around all the other things that you want to do if you want to play around with any sort of machine learning packages or feed it off to any other different format system, whatever, it all kind of already exists. And that's me. So key takeaways: geographic data is sort of hard to work with. GeoPandas gives you some nice tools if you sort of want to play around with them, and a whole bunch of other things that you can do to get a good solution or a good system out the back. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari. Okay, so on deck is a person who is not in this room, and so I'm letting the AV people know to get our remote presenter ready. But first, Jimmy. Stay on stage.
Breaking the ice. So a month ago, I attended a party. This party had a whole heap of art and technology installations. This is the one I did. So one of the big things about this party were connections. So we used a label printer to produce dockets with quests. So these were to assist in the awkwardness of initially interacting with people. So all the stuff you saw on the first slide, this was generally what there was. So there was quite a bit of hardware, which was a nightmare to set up, but was good fun. I did pretty much, this is the general architecture of how it was kind of all joints up. So we had a Raspberry Pi at the core, push button with an RGB, LED, audio, 15 monitors in the background, and the docket printer. This is all the Python software I used. It was kind of a nightmare because there was a lot of it. So GPI 0 was used for controlling the LEDs and the buttons. OpenZV and multiprocessing were used for the background monitors to play a whole heap of video streams. VLC was used on the primary monitor for the main message and audio. Pillow was used to generate the receipts. The star TSP image was for the printer to print it, and Paho MQTT was to link it all up. Result. It was very well accepted. It more than exceeded our expectations. The organizer was absolutely ecstatic about our result. We did this in 2 weeks. It was a challenge. There was quite a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties. The printer was very difficult. I spent 5 hours trying to simply get it to print from code. It was awesome getting it in Windows with a GUI, but that's not terribly useful. At one point, I'd completely wired the button up, and I fried one of the LEDs on it, which was a pain. So that was another hour or so of rewiring. Multiprocessing, oh, this was fun. So we got about 2 hours beforehand, went to deploy on the computers, and multiprocessing just didn't some reason work on Windows. Kind of annoying. And then the bad one. We didn't quite meet the deadline. It was meant to be done by 6:30. I was still working on it till 9. So I became part of the event, which was good fun. Ironically, that actually worked to our favor. And so that's me done.
Thanks for that. Just learning what we all know, which is that Raspberry Pis are cool and printers are terrible. Let me see. So who do we have? So Kisara is up on deck on this side, but now we have Vicki, who is going to be talking. Oh, it's an analogy. I'm excited. Go ahead.
Okay, kia ora everyone. This has been a theme today, I think. Everyone has mentioned Chris's wonderful talk yesterday and the importance of the Python code of conduct. And this talk kind of stems a little bit from what that means to me. So how is code review like a partner dance? I've been social dancing for 3 years for fun, and I've had 5 years with Python and Django. And so I just wanted to kind of give a new metaphor that I really appreciated as someone who is kind of both learning to dance and has had a lot of experience both giving and receiving code review, what that feels like. So unfortunately, we're professionals. It's hard to get away with dancing in the office. Your team might not appreciate the laughter, and change can be scary. I think XKCD captured that pretty well. But we're also human. We know it's fun to get away with dancing in the office. Positive interactions make us feel good, and being challenged is how we learn. Warning, this talk will now contain video of people dancing. So Lindy Hop, if you're not familiar with it already, is a social dance. It's performed by 2 people, and generally speaking, they know the steps, and one of them will lead, one of them will follow, and they'll guide each other either through a routine. But what I'm specifically interested in is how Lindy Hop works in the social sense. So not people performing on stage, but as 2 people communicating with each other as a form of interaction. So the Python code of conduct works just as well for dancers. It focuses on being open, respectful of different viewpoints, showing empathy, being considerate and respectful, gracefully accepting constructive criticism, and being welcoming and using inclusive language. So the most important thing about good code review, as we all know, is trust. I'm not here to tell you how to develop a trusting relationship with your team, but I hope that everyone who's listening to this talk today feels like they have one, and they feel like they're supported in their work environments, because I know how crucial that is. But for the purposes of my metaphor, trust, here we go. Lindy Hop is all about trusting your partner to give you stretch and bounce. Look at these 2 people dancing here. See, ooh, bounce, yeah. There's stretch and then back. Okay, so it's about communication, it's about moving with your partner. Stretch, you know when you feel it. It's a slow deceleration in the hold. Your code reviewer is asking for a change, a difference in direction to redirect you into something else. Bounce is that positive energy, the lightness that you bring to your performance, to your interactions with other people. It helps you guide your energy in the right direction, and it also makes sure that you're keeping each other safe. Some moves can be dangerous. You can injure yourself if you don't move into them properly. So feel the stretch. Don't strong arm your code review partner, and also don't go limp. If you feel like you have made a change that is good, there's a great conversation that you have to open up there. There's an elasticity, a give and a take when you have a good relationship with your code reviewer. So there's another thing about dance that compares to code review is the asking. So how do you want your code review to proceed? In Lindy, there's the concept of leaders and follows. It's common to other dances as well, bachata, salsa. And you might want a leader if you're asking for an architecture review. You want someone to guide you, someone who knows the steps and where you're going. You might want to follow if you want to get someone else familiar with an area of code, or if you want suggestions but not to learn a whole new move. The metaphor doesn't really extend here, because in Lindy Hop you can both you can lead from the follow position as well. There are some moves that translate as well. So when the dancing doesn't go smooth, it's not always your fault. When the code review is rough, it's not your fault. The music could be wrong, there's a hole in the dance floor, you're late, the band didn't show up. Everyone on your team wants to lead, everyone on the team wants to follow. Take a deep breath, we've all been there. The dancing will get better once the underlying problem has been resolved. And whether you're leading or following, when you're giving and receiving good code review, everyone should be having a good time. Thank you. This talk has been very lighthearted and assumes your team has healthy communication with each other.
Thanks, Vicki.
Thank you.
Nick Coughlin is up on deck. I have 2 left feet myself, but I'm okay code review, so maybe there is a future for me. So up now we have Kisara, who is going to be talking about breaking the internet.
Hi, my name is Kisara. and I work for IETF Administration LLC. That was my clickbait title, but I'm going to talk about Internet drafts and Internet standards. Internet standard is a subset of RFCs. RFC is an acronym for request for comments, and RFCs can be informational and they can be experimental, so not all RFCs are Internet standards. But the Internet standards or the RFC starts its life as an Internet draft. These drafts goes through several revisions over the years to become RFC. And this is how RFC 9000 or the Quick protocol came into place. I think the work started around 2016 and released as RFC on 2021. All this happens in an organization called Internet Engineering Task Force, known as IETF. It's an open organization. All you had to do is show up and get involved in the work. And you might wonder what Python has to do with all those things. First, the GNU mailman. So most of the communication in IETF happens on mailing list. IETF uses GNU mailman. There are several hundred active mailing lists at the moment, and I think the mail archive goes back to 1999. And GNU is one of the well-known Python projects. Because RFC Internet drafts has to go through different revisions, there has to be a place to keep track of all the revisions. For that, IETF has a web service called Data Tracker. It does a lot more than keeping track of Internet draft revisions. This is a screenshot from the Data Tracker, again on the RFC 9000. This is an open source project, Python project based on Django. The canonical format of RFCs is XML, and the IETF communities submit Internet drafts as XML. So there has to be a tool to convert them to fancy HTML or PDF formats, and the text format for all those preferred text. And this happens, this is done using another open source Python tool called XML to RFC. You can install that from PyPy. If you want a PDF generation, you need an extra library called VCPrint. It's another free open source Python project. So can Python break internet? I think theoretically possible, because all these tools embedded in IETF using Python. And if you're interested in learning about these tools or contributing to them, you can go into these URLs or talk to me after the conference. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Kisara. Okay, so last on deck we have Joe Walker. And now we have Nick Coughlin, who is going to loudly disagree with me.
Kinda. Okay, so here to talk about something I call the Cookbook Recipe Challenge. It's something I came up with several years ago in the context of functional programming, actually. But what the challenge is it's a trick to overcome something called the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge is that once we've learned something, we tend to forget what it was like to not know that thing and to have to learn it. And so it really skews our sense of what's actually intuitive or not. And so the Cookbook Recipe Challenge is something I came up with to try and teach myself to avoid this, or try to avoid this. And it's take something that I think is intuitive, and then contemplate writing a cookbook recipe using that programming style, and then getting a human to read that recipe and go, what would I have to teach them for them to be able to follow it and for them to be able to do it? So, moving on to some specific examples. Let's consider
a home kitchen recipe. So a cookbook that you've bought to use at home. These recipes, they'll focus on one dish at a time. They'll start with the ingredients. And then you'll follow a bunch of step-by-step instructions. And then occasionally, they'll tell you to do something in parallel. Well, they'll like say, okay, while that's baking in the oven, go do this other thing. Or while that's cooling in the fridge, go do this other thing. So, remind you of anything? Well, what it reminds me of is the way people use Python as a scripting language. So they'll start at the top, they'll give a whole bunch of instructions, and then maybe if they need to do something in the background and then do something else at the same time, they'll use concurrent.futures to push that off to a background task and say, okay, go do that thing, I'll get your result later. Okay, so far so good. And that's a bit where I disagree with Chris. Concurrent.futures is cool. But the bit where I agree with Chris, let's talk about cooking at a fast food joint. Fast food joint, you don't have that, oh, I'm just going to cook one thing at a time. You don't get to do that. You've got orders coming in online, you've got orders coming in from the drive-thru, you've got orders coming in from the counter. You've got to get all the parts of an order and ready. They want their drink and their fries and their burger. But your staff are trained. You're not just throwing Joe Random off the street into your fast food kitchen. You're hopefully giving them at least a bit of training. You're giving them a manual. And you also have a whole bunch of infrastructure in place to support actually getting orders to customers when they ask for them, hot, edible, arguably. But anyway, well, this is starting to sound like using Python for application development. It's like working in teams, and in this kind of environment, async.io is great. Like async.io, it is specifically built around this notion of you have lots of requests coming in, you need to deal with lots of things all at once, and you're trying to interleave them all and get them all done in as efficient a manner as possible. Okay, fine. So concurrent.futures for scripting, async.io for app dev, everything's fine, right? Maybe not. Now, we're going to host a dinner party. So we've got to get multiple dishes all ready at the right time. We've got lots of events that might need to be handled. Maybe our guests show up early. No, what do we have to do now? And well, scripting problems have this habit of growing into app development problems. App development problems have these little pieces of them that are kind of like scripting problems. And if you dig into async.io, you'll find this little thing called async.io.getRunInExecutor, which takes your synchronous task and runs it in a background thread or background process in your async application. So async.io includes concurrent.futures. One of these that may be simpler than the other. So what's the point? Look, imperative programming, a scripting model, really does have real limitations on its ability to handle complexity, but it's still a pretty essential starting point and building block. Like, if people haven't learned imperative programming yet, it's still really the starting point. And if you've learned imperative programming, pushing imperative tasks into the background is a much, much smaller step and a really useful stepping stone to this fully reactive asynchronous programming model. That said, the learning curve for asynchronous programming is nowhere near as steep as it used to be. Go back 20 years and try and do your async stuff, you're going to be in a world of pain. But doing it now, it's much, much easier to start with, and in some problem domains, it is the place to start. But that said, there's a reason cookbooks aren't written that way. So that learning curve is always going to be steeper than the learning curve of imperative programming. But yeah, there we go.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, so I believe the AV crew wanted this podium for something between lightning talks and the end of things. So if that's the case, they can set up over here. If not, Tom and Katie can get set up over here. But first, our last lightning talk, which is Joe.
Right. I'll start with a disclaimer that this whole presentation has nothing to do with my work or professional career at Sequent, so don't judge me based on this home project. I'm Joe, and this is Murphy. He's a dog, and dogs bark occasionally. And we live in Lincoln, so there's like a dog every third house or something out in the suburbs. And not too long ago, we had a complaint from the council that someone had said a large dog in their area is barking. And the council looked at their records and thought, it's probably him. But he's a good boy, sometimes. He doesn't bark much. And so I thought, right, well, we should probably do some recording ourselves and make sure he isn't, because the next step in a dog noise complaint is the council sends a recording device to the person who complained, and they're meant to reply with sort of a clip of 10 minutes of uninterrupted barking, and he doesn't do that. So I decided, why not go use my Python knowledge and do some recording. So it was going to be something that would be sitting there recording for a long time, didn't want to use my desktop, and I thought, great, Raspberry Pi and a cheap mic, easy, that'll be really good. Yeah, just Pi Audio and Wave. Worked great on my desktop, did not work at all once I set up the Raspberry Pi, and I did it the wrong way. That blue plastic is a 3D printed mount that I scurried away and designed, and I had all the wiring very nice, and then I tested it. Always a mistake. Drowning in a hum, and so I spent probably a good hour or two of looking at different packages and different cables and everything until I ran it through a spectrum analyzer, and it's about 50 hertz where all the noise was. So what do you know, cheap power supply and long cables. I tried a USB bank that fixed it, perfect, forgot they needed to be charged and doesn't actually record audio once that dies, so yeah. All right, on to the next bit. Yeah, so slightly better approach. Super old crappy laptop and a webcam. None of that power problems. The cat here is helping me write the script. Yeah, so that was great. That worked for about a week or two until we went away and left the dog alone at home for a day, and then got back and my wife wanted to check the audio, and I realized that uncompressed audio files are actually pretty big and that only had a very small hard drive on it, so it had fallen over and stopped working. So the next thing was compression. So PyDub was great and happily compresses from WAV to MP3. But the laptop is so slow that it would take about 5 minutes to compress a half-hour audio recording, which means I'm losing 5 minutes of audio each time. So I use subprocess, and that kicks off in its own process, and everything works. It's real good. One problem we noticed from when we didn't know it wasn't working because it ran out of space was that there was no status page, you know? I'd have to go into the room, remember the password to the laptop, log in there, stop the recorder, check if there were any recordings, and that seemed like a whole lot of work to do every time I wanted to leave the dog at home. So instead I thought, right, well, let's do a status page, you know, this sort of beautiful dashboard and barks per second and things like that. And so I used my extensive web design knowledge to come up with this. And so there you've got the name of the clip. And because I'm not very good at reading timestamps, I decided I'll just put the last time it was recorded. And that works. And that was good enough for me. I stopped there. That was fine. The council actually never got back to us. So these people didn't record any audio of 10 minutes. All of this work was kind of for nothing. And that's good because the manual process of checking it, I mean, I got too lazy to do anything more, was super painful. You open a clip in Audacity, a 30-minute clip, and you scan through it, and you're like, is that a bark? Probably not. Most of the time it wasn't. That's one single bark in there, and the rest of it is construction, people mowing, cars driving by. Useless, absolutely useless. I did look into some audio analysis, tons of awesome Python packages for that. Thought volume would be a really easy way to go, but yeah, as you can see, that'd be a wash. And I quickly realized that I didn't want to burn even more time going down all the machine learning ways. Maybe I'll do that in the future, who knows? It'd be nice to be able to check the status remotely and to get live audio streaming if he possibly is barking and being a menace. But again, you'd have to like think of security and stuff, and that seemed pretty hard, so I didn't do that either. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So all lightning talks should have a good shaggy dog story in them, and this was a shaggy dog story that was actually a shaggy dog story, and it ended up being a shaggy dog story. So thanks for that, Joe. Okay, that is the end of our lightning talks. Can we give a huge round of applause to our 12 presenters? Thanks to Tom for managing the timer, which has just gone to red, but you don't have to wave me off. I've got all the time I need. I've been doing this thing for 10-ish years now, and the person who makes me look competent by wrangling all the presenters in their AV, Ryan Werner, has been doing it for as long as I have here, so give him a round of applause as well. Okay. So I think what happens now is that there'll be a moment or two's pause while 5 minutes apparently, while you can chat with yourselves while our compares get set up for the close of this conference. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed the lightning talks and see you at the next one of these.